So in question number 77 and 78, they ask for the horizontal asymptotes. And when I think about horizontal asymptotes, I think about comparing the highest power that is in the numerator and the denominator. So we want to look at the highest power in the numerator and denominator and then see what is going to dominate or win as you get bigger and bigger and bigger. So if the denominator wins, then what happens in that situation is that you have 1 over or a number over a very, very big number. And remember, when you have something in the denominator, the opposite is going to happen. So if it's big in the denominator, it's going to be super, super duper small when you evaluate that out. So it's going to be, for example, a 0.00000001. So when the denominator wins, your horizontal asymptote will be y is equal to 0. When there's a tie, then what happens in that case is all of the smaller terms. So for example, if I have x squared plus 3x minus 1, x squared minus 5x plus 10, all of these smaller terms aren't going to really matter. What's going to matter is the coefficient that's on this x squared, this coefficient that's on the denominator. So what you do when you have a tie is you look at y is equal to the leading coefficient over the leading coefficient of the denominator. Okay, and then that's our second case, and then the numerator winning. When the numerator wins, what happens there is it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and so there's not going to be any flattening out of the graph, and so we have to say that there's no horizontal asymptote. So that's our memorization part, is that understanding denominator wins, y is equal to 0, tie, leading over leading, and then numerator wins, there's no horizontal asymptote. So again, I always think about the O in denominator, 0, the N in numerator, no. So if you look at number 77 here, they have 8x squared minus 9x minus 4 over 3x squared minus 8x plus 8. Now the important thing about this is that when you see that word horizontal, you think to yourself, okay, horizontal, I'm looking for the highest powers and comparing those highest powers. So this 2 and this 2 mean that we have a tie. And so if we have a tie, all of this trailing stuff is not going to matter to us at all. The only thing that's going to matter are those leading coefficients. So it will be y is equal to 8 over 3 as the horizontal asymptote. So we have y is equal to 8/3 as the horizontal asymptote for question number 77. All right, so let's quickly look at question number 78 as a comparison here. So with question number 78, they give us x plus 8 over x squared minus 1. Now again, when you see in the instructions horizontal asymptotes, you say to yourself, okay, I'm looking at the highest powers that are on the numerator and denominator. So in the numerator, the highest power is x to the first. In the denominator, the highest power is 2. So here, the denominator is going to win. So if the denominator wins, you have a big, big number in the denominator. And so that means overall, it's going to be a very, very small number that we're approaching, and we will have y is equal to 0 as the horizontal asymptote. Now, you can, of course, graph this on your graphing calculator. On these last two, it might have been a little bit harder to actually see it visually. For example, if I were to graph this second one, I would put parentheses around the x plus 8 because it is 2 terms. Then I would divide it by and put parentheses around the x squared minus 1. And when I graph it, especially if it's zoomed out, I don't see anything really of note. So what I would do is I'd hit the zoom button and then go to the standard window to start. And when you look at this graph, like, it's very obvious where the vertical asymptotes are, but the horizontal asymptote is coming from, if you look over here at the far right-hand side, there is this flattening out towards the x-axis, and the x-axis is y is equal to 0. So that flattening out corresponds to y is equal to 0 as the horizontal asymptote. And the same thing goes over here. This flattening out would correspond to y is equal to 0 as the horizontal asymptote. Okay, so that would be the way that you would get to the horizontal asymptotes using your graphing calculator. So either way is fine, graphing it or looking at the highest power, but we definitely want to be able to find those horizontal asymptotes.